To understand our Gemara today, we need to explore the relationship between primacy and primality. Primality is what we experience in real life, and we'll talk about that at all. And then there's primacy, which is the way we think. We're thinking about the Rebbeinu Shem, we're going to be talking about that there's an element of the Rebbeinu Shem that we experience in a primal way, and there's an element of the Rebbeinu Shem that we understand in a primary way, and something which is much higher. And the relationship between primacy and primality is something we need to understand in order to understand the Gemara. Primacy and primality, ltzni'utah בעלמא, Zevachim Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara is dealing with something we've dealt with before, and that's whether kedusha rishona kidsha l'sha'ata v'kidsha la'atid lavo. Initially, David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech established the Beis HaMikdash and gave it Kedusha. Was that Kedusha given to the structure of the building they built, or of the ground on which the building was built? The difference will be what happens when there isn't a building. So if you say that the Kedusha was given to the ground, then the Kedusha stays even after the Churban. If you say the Kedusha was given to the structure, when the structure is not there, the Kedusha goes as well. And that's a machlokas the Gemara deals with in a number of different places, including on our daf. And one of the things that Rabbi Lapin says over here is that when Ezra came back and they were rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, they set up curtains around the territory, the area of the Beis HaMikdash, while they re-established the walls. And the Gemara questions, what is the purpose? If we say that there was Kedusha in the territory, not just in the structure, then even if there was no structure and they were busy rebuilding the structure, they didn't have to put up curtains around in order to give Kedusha to the area. The area has its own Kedusha in any case, so what was the function of the curtains? Says the Gemara, so according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says they put these curtains up as they built the structure. In the case of the Heichal, they put the curtains up and built the structure outside of the curtains, so the builders never went beyond the curtains. In the case of the Azara, the outside walls, that didn't matter so much. They were able to build from the inside. They put the curtains up on the outside and they built from the inside. That whole discussion, asked the Gemara, why do you have to put up these curtains? The Beis HaMikdash has its Kedusha, whether or not they're curtains, whether or not they're walls, whether or not they're structures. What do the curtains add? Answers the Gemara, strange answer, ltzni'utah ba'almah, it was done for tznius, for modesty. And we had that idea back on Daf Samach Amud Aleph, where we had an important Matmonim shir defining the whole idea of tznius, because there also we talked about whether the hands of the Kohen were visible over the walls while he was doing the avodah, standing on the mizbeach and so on. And we talked a little bit about tznius at that time, and this shir kind of links into that shir. But what is the tzniutah ba'almah? Why does the Beis HaMikdash need tznius? What's going on there? Are the Kohanim taking showers and there's got to be the tznius around there? Are they living there with their wives? None of that's taking place. What do you need tznius around the Beis HaMikdash for? There was a Zohar on last week's Parsha on Vayigash. The Zohar was talking about why Yosef asked the Mitzrim to clear out of the room when he revealed himself to his brothers. Tor Chazi, says the Zohar, B'shaita de tuv itar dehu yemina, when goodness is pervading the world, which is the force of the right, kol chidu v'chol birkon mishtakon, every goodness and every brocha is there as well. When things are good, when the Rebbeinu Shalom is showering the world with goodness, every kind of brocha and goodness comes through. V'cholo b'chashai iyu. But that's all done in secrecy. That's all done very quietly. And in the Zohar's typical mysterious way, the Zohar says, just as with Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Voed. If you understand the connection. No, not really. B'chashoy, you say it quietly. So now do you understand the connection? Well, not really. V'raza da begin the iu kedin yichud kedekochozi. And the secret and understanding, the real deep understanding of this is to understand the principle of yichud. So there are three principles mentioned in the Zohar. The chashoy, the secretiveness of it. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Voed, which we say after the Shema. And Yichudu, which is an implication of the power of male-female connection. What's that got to do with it? So the Reishis Chochma in Sha'ar Av at the beginning of Perek Daled talks about Dino and Shechem. So Shechem ben Hamor falls in love with Dinah. The Torah uses 3 words to describe his love. Deveko, Chashiko, and Chafitzo. Just different forms of desire. But they're all very primal desires. You're talking really about a sexual attraction on 3 different levels. Says the Reishis Chochmah that we learn from that, just as that Rosho attached himself to Dino in those 3 levels, Kein Ra'ui ha'adam shetidabek nafsho b'shchina begimel mitziyut ha'ele. So this idea of when we noticed Yichud in respect of Hashem's presence in the Beis HaMikdash, that's not just by chance. The connection between Hashem and us is as primal and as intimate as the connection between a man and a woman, between a husband and a wife. That's the nature of that connection. And just as Hashem feels that way about us, we need to feel that way about Hashem. So we see that there is this kind of majestic image of Hashem, and there's a more primal image of Hashem. If you can imagine it, you can think of a king. You can think of a present-day king or an ancient king or of a very great person. And you think of the king on his throne, you think of the president in his office, you think of Einstein sitting and working with his diagrams on his boards and his papers. That's your image of the person. You could also think of him in the shower. You could also think of him sitting on the toilet. He does those things too. Yes, it's true, but that damages the picture of majesty. There's actually an interference between the primal image and the primary image. That primality and primacy, as I'm calling it, are in conflict with one another. It's very difficult to think of the image as both. One of the techniques they teach in public speaking, if a person has a terrible fear of public speaking, and they say it's one of the biggest fears of all, one of the things I say is look at your audience and just think of them sitting in the bathroom or something. They're just ordinary people. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. They're just ordinary people. Don't have to be afraid of them. They're just like you. And that reduces people. It doesn't elevate people. It reduces people. So by seeing people in a really authentic way, it's true, but it's primal. That primality interferes with primacy. And when we come to the Ribbono Shel Olam, there are also those 2 dimensions. The Ribbono Shel Olam interacts very intimately with the world, but he's also a level of oneness that encompasses the world. There isn't an interaction. From a primacy perspective, it's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. There's no connection. He's not connected. He is everything. Connection implies there too. Hashem Echad implies there's no connection because there's only one. It's all one. And then right afterwards we say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso. What is Malchus? You are the king of all these different forces in the world. You are the king of all these different entities in the world. Different entities, Hashem Echad, everything, Ein Od Milvado, there's just oneness. So there's a tension between Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Vod, which we'll see in a moment. But what's important is, if there is a primal connection, if apart from this primacy of Hashem as one that includes everything, and we can understand that, we can get that, but that's not how we experience Hashem. We experience Hashem primally. We experience Hashem connected to us, guiding us, punishing us. We feel Hashem in interaction. We feel Hashem as a force separate from us who engages with us. But we know that's not really true. Hashem Echad and Ein Od Milvado. So what we know and what we feel are not the same. Where is the place of the primal relationship? What does the Torah say? V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Make a mikdash and I will live betocham. Betocham implies penetration. I will penetrate them. I will get right into them. I will be so close and intimate with them. Where? In the Beis HaMikdash. So if you think of the Beis HaMikdash, if you think of a palace, the world is a palace. The Beis HaMikdash is not the parlor. The Beis HaMikdash is not the office. The Beis HaMikdash is not the study. The Beis HaMikdash is not the dining room. The Beis HaMikdash is the bedroom. That's where Hashem and Klal Yisrael get really close. That's where Hashem and Klal Yisrael get intimate. and the bedroom door stays closed. That's the tznius that the Beis Hamikdash needs. The place where Hashem and Am Yisrael connect intimately, that primal place exists but is not on public exhibition. Because publicly we've got to relate to the Rebbeinu Shalom in his primacy role. We've got to relate to the Rebbeinu Shalom in his oneness role. By the way, so the Zohar implies that is what Yosef did when he told the Mitzrim to get out of the room, because what was about to happen was primal. The Mitzrim saw Yosef as the king of Egypt, as the president, as the prime minister, and now they're going to see him hug his brothers who he hasn't seen, who sold him. They're going to see him cry and break down in tears, and they'll break down in tears. It's going to be a very primal experience. It's not for public viewing. So, Tziyum Alai, get the people out of here, because what's about to happen is so intimate that it's not for public viewing. And that idea of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Le'elam Voed, which the Zohar links to all of this, is referring to the Gemara in Psochim on Daf Nun Vov, where the Gemara talks about, you remember, we did a Matmonim on it as well, about why we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Le'elam Voed quietly. And it links to the whole thing that's in the coming week's Parsha. It's interesting that this is all around last week's and this week's Parsha, where Yaakov brings the sons together, and he says he wants to talk to them, and he's worried. He thinks that he hasn't got proper Ruach HaKodesh. Maybe there's something wrong among the children, and he asks them, and they say, Shema Yisrael, listen, Yaakov, Yisrael, we all believe with all our hearts, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And Yaakov says, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Le'elam Voed. That's where it comes from. And the Gemara says, why do we say it softly? There's a discussion in the Gemara, but one of the discussions, Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, Omer Debe Rabbi Ami, Mashal lebat melech shehiricha tzike kedera. There's a very important woman. She's a socially prestigious woman. Is sitting in the dining room with her guests, and there's a beautiful dish. It's delicious. And when it's finished, she's finished her plate, and the servants take all the leftovers back to the kitchen. She wants to lick the dish. She wants to go back and just take every last scrap out of the dish. But it pasnit, you can't do that. So what do? Im tomar yesh la genai. If she tells anybody, it would look disgusting. Lo tomar yesh la tsar. If she doesn't, she sits there craving. So she goes into the kitchen in the corner in the back of the kitchen, and she licks the dish in the back of the kitchen, and that way she resolves it. That's how the Gemara explains Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Le'elam Voed. To talk about Hashem's intimate relationship with the world diminishes his primacy in the same way as watching this amazing woman lick the dish would diminish her primacy. But it's her, it's authentic, she just loves it, it's cute, what's wrong with it? The image wouldn't be right. It would damage people's image of her for the rest of time. And so she has to do it b'chashay. And so we have Shema Yisrael, the oneness of Hashem is how we understand Hashem. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa is how we experience Hashem. There's a beautiful Reb Chaim Volozhner, a very deep Reb Chaim Volozhner, which I'll quote in the footnotes here for those of you who are interested to follow up on it, explaining this tension between the way we understand Hashem and the way we experience Hashem. The way it's in the Beis Hamikdash is how we experience Hashem. But the way we need to understand Hashem is not that way. We need to understand Hashem in his primacy, not in his primality. Our experience is one of primality, a primal relationship of a God loving his people, intimate with his people, scolding his people, punishing his people, sad about his people. Those are all the things we experience, but we know that's not really Hashem. We're diminishing Hashem by experiencing him that way, in a sense. But that is how we experience him. And he gives us the right to experience him that way, but quietly. That's not what you talk about. When you talk about Hashem and when you think about Hashem, it's Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And so when they rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash, they didn't need to put the curtains up in order to define the space. They didn't need to put the curtains up in order to give Kedusha to the Beis Hamikdash. The Kedusha was Kidsha L'Sha'ata v'Kidsha La'asid Lovoi. The space was already fully Kodesh. It doesn't need the walls, it doesn't need the fences, it doesn't need the curtains. What is it there for? L'tzni'utah ba'alma, to make sure that what goes on in the Beis Hamikdash stays in the Beis Hamikdash. And what the people relate to is the oneness of Hashem, which is far above even what happens in the Beis Hamikdash.